when you're living in the city, I think you crave green, and you start really like searching for it everywhere, and that kind of like sparked that interest. And once you're living out east, it's that's one of your choices. There aren't many work choices out here. You're either in real estate, landscaping, or construction. Or nonprofit. It used to be really about like preserving this garden and this thing, and it was very inward looking, and now we're much more outward looking, and we're really sort of like one of the sort of last bits of old Sagaponack. And that's kind of something that's very important for us to sort of keep. And again, it's like we've got buildings from 1740 and 1850, and it's about keeping that sort of older spirit of Sagaponack that was very casual when it wasn't so wealthy, and some of the really wealthy people there really care about that. They might have a much nicer home than someone would have in the late 60s, but they still really care about Sagaponack being this very quiet place. They have very high-test lives in New York, generally speaking, and they just want to get away from it all for the weekend.
If Robert Dash was here right now, what do you think he'd say about the spirit of Madoo and the garden's evolution and the impact of his work in the community?
I think he'd say you're spending too much money. He was very tight.
Welcome to POV Hamptons, where real conversations meet soulful perspectives. I'm Anastasia Gavalis, your host, inviting you into the lives of visionaries, change makers, and creatives shaping the East End. This isn't just any podcast. It's a movement with real people, unfiltered stories, authentic voices, and elevated insights. We shine a light on the individuals making waves in our community. We explore the ideas shaping the Hamptons and the moments that carry life's deepest lessons. From inspiring journeys to transformative conversations, this show reveals the true heartbeat of this iconic destination. One high-vibing episode at a time. So settle in. You're about to discover what makes this place truly extraordinary. Let's dive in.
Welcome to today's episode. I'm really excited to have Alejandro Saralegui here, the Executive Director of Madoo Conservancy.
Pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to just start off really first just to ask, what brought you out here, out east to the Hamptons?
It's sort of a long story, but I had been working in fashion for quite a while, and in a business that is really difficult in the city. And my partner and I had bought a house in Bridgehampton, and the business I was working with went bankrupt for like the third time, or closed. And I was just like, I can't take this anymore. So I was like, okay, I'm going to sublet my apartment in the city and save some money and go out east and try and do something out there. And it just kind of like became like 22 years of doing something out here, which is a little nutty.
Really cool. That time flies when you're having fun, they say, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what got you interested in art?
So I was, as I always say, I was probably like the loser in like 4th or 5th grade who was like, do I want to be a horticulturalist or an art historian? And I chose art history at the time. And I kind of had a very determined effort to become a curator at the Met. And it almost worked. I ended up working, and my first job out of college was at the Met. So I did everything from like, those personality tests that you take in 10th grade and tried to make it seem like I would be a good person for like a creative job, even though like I wasn't like an artist. I wasn't one of like the arty kids in school. So I did that, and then I studied art history. I went to SUNY Purchase, which has a good art history program by virtue of being close to the city. And I ended up, working at the Met, my first job out of college.
Not bad.
So it was sort of exactly what I wanted to do until I realized that, and they liked me a lot there at the Met. I was taking German at lunchtime and applying to the Institute of Fine Arts until I was like, Jane, get me off this crazy thing. I'm like, I'm not quite ready to go to graduate school. I realized I didn't have a trust fund.
That's
a
a
big
rude
that's a big
awakening.
no-no in the art history world, and the museum world. So I ended up moving off from the Met, and I went to work at Interview Magazine. From there, I worked at some galleries and kind of continued in that sort of an arty world until I moved into fashion, and then I did fashion for a long time in the city, and then moved out here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So were there any key moments or influencers or influences that shaped the path, would you say?
Um, I mean, like as a little kid, those two interests of mine, horticulture and art history, were based on that I loved growing things as a little kid. So I always had like punch and grow tomatoes and peppers and zinnias in the garden. And my mom would take us to the Met. And, I'm the youngest in my family. So when I was really little, I didn't get to go. So when I finally got to go, it was really exciting. And my mom's pretty smart. So she would take us to see the mummies in the Egyptian department and arms and armor. And you see, medieval jousting, at the Met. Or, the armor that they wear. But they're also they're mounted on horses and all that. So it's really fun for kids to see. Like, she didn't take us to European paintings when we were little. And then I just kept going into the city. I grew up just outside the city, so it was easy. And little by little, just started learning more and more about art history. So going to the Met was definitely, as a kid, was really important for me. And then it just, you just sort of start following different paths. And, I studied in Siena for a semester, and that really got me into Italian art at the time, which I still really love. There was a beautiful show on Sienese art at the Met this past winter. And then the gardening thing was just kind of one of the, when you're living in the city, I think you crave green. And you start really searching for it everywhere. And that kind of sparked that interest. And once you're living out east, it's, that's one of your choices. There aren't many work choices out here. You're either in real estate, landscaping, or construction, or nonprofit.
So how did that path of art history, obviously you knew from a young age, you just that was just, sang to you very,
very
clearly.
Literally a choice. I literally remember one summer, looking up the word horticulture in the encyclopedia, and I already knew what art history was, but and kind of making that decision, literally the loser fifth grader kid.
No, not loser.
But I just kind of was
Really?
it's also kind of a piece of being the youngest kid, where everyone's kind of your eldest brothers are already starting their careers, and you're kind of you want to be part of that,
Right.
Because
right.
that seems so cool.
Right. Because you were the youngest of 7.
Yeah.
So that for sure you had a lot of
There's
role
a lot
models.
of role models,
yes,
exactly. Yeah,
yes.
where you're looking at people, and they had interesting jobs. I had a sister who was working at Mademoiselle, and a brother who's a writer, and another brother who went into advertising, and so they all did sort of interesting things, or at least in my mind. So I was kind of what am I going to be doing,
Right.
And you sort of start planning out your life, and you want to get out of this tiny town that you live in, and
Move to another tiny town.
to another, and then now I've landed in a really tiny town. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So how again did that lead you to the path of getting into have you heard about Madoo? Because I have to tell you, it wasn't until a few years ago that I heard about this beautiful little enchanted place called Madoo. So I'm curious,
yeah,
what led
it's
you?
It's still a little secret in Sagaponack.
Yeah.
I always say that there are people in our cul-de-sac that probably haven't been to Madoo, which is really true. I mean, I can actually guarantee, I can prove that. It was really I knew about it, and I had been working at. I mean, when you don't have a lot of money and whatever. So when I first moved out here, I worked at Williams-Sonoma. I'm good at retail. I put myself through college, working a retail job in the city, and and I was very good there. I can sell a pan. and I like to cook a lot, so it was easy. But then I started working for a friend, and when the spring came around, I started working for a friend who had a really great nursery, and he and I kind of treated it like it was the Bergdorf Goodman of nurseries.
I love
And well, we just grew things for our ladies, for our customers.
Okay.
And it was a time when people still did garden, because people don't really garden anymore. I mean, there's a big uptick in gardening in a way, but out here, there's much less of it than there used to be, let's say. You know, it's a lot more of pointing to their gardeners and telling them what to do. Back then, you know, you'd be helping people design their garden, pots, whatever. And so it was really fun. And we grew really amazing plants, and we got seeds from England, and, you know, just started having this very boutique garden center in Wainscott. And then that kind of, that recession the Great Recession of like 2008, 2009 came about, and that kind of changed it all a lot. And I started working a little bit after that at Madoo. And it was very part-time in the beginning. So I kept my nursery job, but did Madoo at night, and then little by little I transitioned to Madoo full-time.
What were you doing in the beginning? Like, what were your responsibilities?
It was really sort of, Robert Dash was still alive, who's the founder of the garden.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very personal assistant type of thing. And dealing with, it wasn't such a big operation back then. So, you know, we had membership, but we probably had like 80 members, and at best. And so, you know, it's like thank you notes and trying to get people to come. We would, at the time, we're doing summer lectures, I guess. So kind of organizing that type of thing, but it was catch as catch can. And then the last year of Bob's life was a lot about taking care of Bob, and until he passed away in 2013. And then all of a sudden it became like this big thing, you know, where I was in charge of the art and the gardens and, you know, the business side of things. And that's how the job developed, really.
Who was Robert Dash? Tell us. Like,
Who
was this man?
Really sort of remarkable guy. You might call him a Renaissance man or a polymath, who was born in New York City and homeschooled because he had a disease, which I always forget what he had, that his mom was like, oh, no, you can't go to school. But I think he probably could have. And he ended up graduating from Erasmus Hall in Brooklyn, like first or second of his class. Very, very highly, he did very well there. And then he went to the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque and fell in with a very arty crowd, including Georgia O'Keeffe, and was the editor of the Poetry Review. So he did very well in college, and then came back to New York, lived downtown, and you're coming up to like the 50s, and was part of that whole sort of like Cedar Tavern world of artists and writers and poets. So he was writing art criticism and poetry, and started painting in probably about 1958 with Alex Katz, which is, you know, a pretty remarkable person to learn how to paint from. So he started painting, and, you know, he had his first show in, I think, 1961.
In the city?
In the city.
Okay.
And then he ended up moving out here in 1967, moving to Madoo. He bought the property the year before and moved in the spring of 1967. And that was basically it. Like, he traveled 2 or 3 times, but other than that, he lived at Madoo the entire time, painting, and then little by little creating this garden that we now know.
Right. So it is a historic home, right? You had said.
Yeah. It's the main barn, the main edifice, building, is a barn from 1740, which belonged to the house right next to us on Main Street. And then there's other sort of 19th century buildings around it that Bob just kind of pushed around to create a house and connected them all.
And he lived there.
And he lived there.
Did he live alone?
Yeah, he lived alone.
He lived alone.
And then he had another house on the property. So he had 2 houses on the property, and he switched seasonally. So you would get a call.
Did one have heat and one not, or
basically, yeah. One was cheaper to heat at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of like you'd get the call in April and it's like, we're moving tomorrow. And it's all hands on deck. And the gardeners would come in and, you move the paintings. And he has a beautiful little de Kooning drawing. So the de Kooning would go with him and his clothing and, his food and whatever. And you'd move it from house to house. And you'd turn one phone off and you'd turn the other phone on. And
So funny.
yeah, very quirky.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you coming from like a more structured, cultured, curating spaces in the museum, in a gallery, to like more of an organic space. What did you have to shift internally? What did you have to shift? I mean, you always loved it, but there's it's sort of a different world, right? It's
they're all, everything's sort of intertwined. I mean, I was never like a curator at the Met. I worked in education and I did a lot of programming and working with their interns, who were like 10 times smarter than me, which is kind of hysterical. That I was their boss and I was like, oh my God, you're so much smarter than me. Everything that I've done is very aesthetic minded, from the get go. And that's the thread that really connects it all, because it really seems like I have this crazy resume, and I do. From working at a museum to galleries to, I worked for Sports Illustrated during the Barcelona Olympics, to working in fashion, which, I can't draw, so I'm completely useless. But, my mom liked fashion. I followed fashion for most of my life, and, I was good at it. But I can do it when it's in front of me and like I have a pair of scissors, but I can't like literally draw anything. And then coming out here and it gardens, and it just kind of like, it became, a much looser version of all of that. But at the same time, like very creative, you can put different plants in a pot and all of a sudden you've got like a little mini garden. And,
Right.
And then you have this space that is really beautifully designed, and you're trying to figure out how to take care of it and how to push it forward and not keep it, make sure it's fresh and not stale for people. So like, you want a garden to be changed, or this garden in particular is a lot of it's about change.
A lot of it is ever evolving and always changing. Is that your point?
Yeah. I mean, Bob was very clear that he said he didn't want the garden preserved in amber, is a nice way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
So, which gives you a lot of latitude. I mean, you're not going to cut down the ginkgos because they're pretty magnificent, but you might change a planting nearby, or there might be something that, Bob actually just didn't really care about. Like it wasn't a piece of the garden that was taken care of. Mm-hmm. And then you decide like, okay, let's put a garden there, or let's change this up. Or like, as he would say, like, nature's going to take its course, and trees die and that kind of thing. So something might need to be replaced, or maybe they're too tight. They're growing too tightly together, and you need to change something up.
So it's ever evolving.
It's constantly evolving.
And even in the winter, when we walked it.
Even in the winter,
Yeah, it was changing. It was certain things were popping up, and certain things were, still
so
dormant.
For instance, that's a good example of something that we've changed quite a bit, which is the garden had very little winter interest when I got there. And I've been trying to add more winter interest just because, we have people coming through for lots of different reasons, whether they're coming through for a lecture or coming by to visit or one thing or another, and you want to show them something in bloom and not gray Long Island.
Cold,
rainy,
gray,
wintry, rainy Long Island.
Yes,
exactly.
yes. So that leads me to my next question of, is it open to the public? Can you just share a little bit about it?
Yeah, the garden's open to the public.
Year-round, is it seasonal?
It's seasonal, yeah.
Okay.
So
when do you open then?
We open mid-April, and we'll close, I think, somewhere around October 16th. Open on the weekends, noon to Friday and Saturday, noon to 4, and then in the summer we add Wednesday and Thursday. So then it becomes like Wednesday through Saturday, noon to 4. And that seems to be working pretty well for us, and like covers enough people that, you can make an appointment to come see the garden privately.
Okay.
But, with what is that, 4 or 5 days?
Right.
4 days open.
You don't need an appointment.
It's kind of enough.
Okay.
Unless someone's really like only there Monday and Tuesday.
Right.
You know, we'll make an exception and we'll invite them in.
And people are able to walk in. Is there a charge?
It's free, which is really nice. With a grant from Charlotte Moss and Barry Friedberg, her husband. Charlotte's on our board, and that's a really nice gesture on their part. And it's a self-guided tour. So we have a little map. You get the map and you walk around. And it's really about appreciating. People always want like labels on things, and they're just more trouble than they're worth, in my mind. You know, it's just really like try and enjoy it and hopefully get some inspiration from it. You know, you can always ask me what the plant is. We're actually building a new welcome center, and it's going to have a little library so that if someone is interested in a plant, they can look it up and actually learn something about it. Because usually when I tell someone, you know, hey, it's a Acer Grecium, it's in one ear and out the other.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
like they want to know the name, but then they forget it.
But then
because it's not, yeah.
Yeah. So our goal is really like for people to like go back into that little research library, find the page and, you know, in a garden encyclopedia, and take a picture of it on their phone and take it to their nursery center, and like hopefully people will start planting different things inspired by Madoo.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I could
that'd be
see
nice.
that. I could see that happening, which will be really great. How different is Madoo today than it was when Bob was alive?
Not terribly. I'd say it's more manicured now. At the end of the day, I mean, it still has a pile of weeds. Every garden does.
Yes.
But we definitely are much more on top of things, which is just a different attitude. It's still a completely organic garden. It still has virtually every feature that was there when Bob was there. We've changed one major feature, but it's still the same thing. It's a rill, and it used to be it's this little thin water canal in the back garden, and
Where
Bob
the
had
bridge, where that walking bridge is? No, that's the side. Where that cute walking bridge is.
Yeah,
that
no.
in the
Way
back?
in the back.
Okay.
Way in the back, behind the winter house, and it's just a very long, thin canal. And before, it was the construction of it was a little, slipshod, and now it's a lot sharper. And the gardens around it were always kind of a mess and never really worked. So we've tightened that up quite a bit, but it's still like this interesting water feature that people don't generally see here. It has a really interesting history. It's Indo-Persian, so it's the kind of thing that you would see at the Taj Mahal, but you'd also see in Morocco. You see in the south of Spain, and so it has that sort of interest, like historical interest. It has forced perspective, so it goes from something like 12 inches in width at the front to at the far end, which is about 150 feet away, to 6 inches, making it seem, in theory, even longer. So it's all about Renaissance perspective and this very sort of interesting Indo-Persian history too.
Really cool.
But it had all of that before. It's just a simplified, probably prettier version now. Depending, yeah. I mean, it had moments. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful in Bob's time, but it was just a very difficult garden, and we literally was just kind of falling apart. So we were like,
Right,
okay,
you had to fix it.
it's time to fix it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we do is we fix things, and we hopefully make them better and last a lot longer. You know, so that,
Right. I remember when I first walked it with you that it reminded me of my trip when I was able to see the Yves Saint Laurent Majorelle Gardens.
Yeah.
And it was just that same, just gorgeous, organic, beautiful, true to the climate and the land.
Exactly.
Slightly different than Morocco, but as far as the variation, but really that sort of feel. So it's really nice.
Yeah.
It's very walkable, very accessible, which
Yeah.
is really nice. How does Madoo engage visitors and, inspire them, and of all different ages, I'm assuming, and backgrounds to come?
Yeah, we've got, I mean, there's a lot of program. There's not a lot of programming, but we have a good amount of programming, starting with toddlers that we have a really popular program called Monday Mornings at Madoo, which is starting April 21st with the Bridgehampton Library here. And they send over one of their children's librarians to do storytelling for an hour. And it's really great. And by the time summer rolls around, you've got like 40 people. It's kind of amazing. And it's probably their most popular children's program, which is kind of funny. And then we do a camp for like tweens at the end of August when there is no camp and parents don't know what to do with their children.
And what do they do? I'm just curious. What's
It's
the focus?
it's a maker's camp, so they do like flower pressing. They'll make soaps. They'll do some cooking projects. They'll do some art projects. It's fun.
That's
they have
really
a good time.
cool. Yeah.
And we do it with a great art teacher. So that's here in Bridgehampton. So that's fun. And we have our summer benefit, which is a big garden market. It's not about like paying $1,000 to hobnob, but it's really like a fun experience. We have about 30 different vendors, and it's all sorts of from garden things to antiques, to clothing to jewelry, but it's all curated with a sort of Hamptons lifestyle in mind. And some of the things that like Madoo represents, like it's color, it's very organic, and things tend to be just on the more sustainable side. Not always, but it's fun to introduce people to these different brands, and then there's a really nice cocktail party in the evening.
So it's
there's
really
a lot
nice.
of different. So we reach out. So we reach out to different people in different ways. Yeah, but the thing is that the market's free during the daytime. So anyone can come.
Can come
which
and
is
enjoy it. Yeah.
what's really nice. And the cocktail party isn't like crazy expensive.
Right. Well, it's great. It sounds very local. I haven't been. I told you I'm going to
It's
try
like,
to stop
you
by
gotta-
this.
yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta try it.
But it sounds local and artisan, and really I think that's one of the feelings that you get when you walk into even the property. It's really nice like that. How do you balance preserving the history? Because I know when we walk through, I saw his kitchen, bedroom. How do you balance preserving the essence while still allowing it to evolve and adapt to, let's say, today's 2025?
Yeah, I mean, anybody that sees something like the living quarters, the sort of that haven't been restored, are like, oh, you can't touch it, you can't touch it, you can't touch it, and you're like, yes, I can. Because the reality is, this isn't comfortable. The toilet almost fell through the floor. Literally, the toilet almost fell through the
So
floor.
it's time to
So
time to update.
It's time to update, and you have to update, and I like to think I'm smart enough that I'm not going to ruin it.
Right.
I mean, the studio is very different than when Bob lived there, but we couldn't use it like Bob had it. We don't, I'm not a painter, it's not, this is now a public space. So things are different. But you keep the spirit of Bob, and you keep that sort of, it doesn't necessarily have to be like super fancy. It can be really casual. The floor tiles in the library, everyone loves them, but they're the same ones that were there, but they used to be on sand, and so in the summertime they'd be really slippery because of the humidity, and in a library you can imagine that's not really good, and there'd be anthills.
Right.
Literally, there'd be anthills in the library because it's just on sand.
Right.
So now it's on concrete, and now it's flat.
You were able to preserve those tiles?
We saved the tiles.
It's perfect. Yeah.
And, you just set them
Properly.
Properly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it works. And the same with when we renovate the kitchen, it will choose appliances that'll be in keeping, but not necessarily like everyone's always like, oh, it's so cute, and you're just kind of like, an electric stove isn't so cute.
Right.
You try cooking on this thing.
Right. It's could be dangerous, right? It could be like out there.
You're
You got to be careful.
Exactly. You want like safety. Like there's
Yes.
there's no vent, and so when caterers are in, the fire alarm goes off every time.
Yes.
That's no fun for anybody. So you want to update, but keep the spirit of the place. And I think we're pretty good at it. We work with Kitty McCoy, who's on our board, who's a local architect here, and she's pretty brilliant at all of this. And she's an old Bridgehampton family. It's like she gets it.
Right. And in keeping with that, again, there's this really special place in Sagaponack. There aren't too many public places in Sagaponack,
No,
right?
exactly.
And so it's like this little treasure in the space of a zip code that's very well known to a lot of,
Yeah.
high influential people and lots of very expensive properties and homes. How do you think Madoo reflects the character of the Hamptons, specifically that area?
That's interesting because I think in the beginning, so let's just say 12 years ago, from beginning for me. So not so much when Bob was alive, but let's just say in the past 10, 12 years, I think our mission has sort of changed.
How so?
Because it used to be really about like preserving this garden and this thing, and it was very inward looking, and now we're much more outward looking, and we're really sort of like one of the sort of last bits of old Sagaponack. And that's kind of something that's very important for us to sort of keep. And again, it's like we've got buildings from 1740 and 1850, and Bob's library from whatever 1970 or so. So it's not all spanking new, and it's not all, even when we fix things up, when we redid the rill, we used the same bricks. We kept the bricks and we just relaid them. So it still had that feeling of the old rill. And it's about keeping, that sort of older spirit of Sagaponack that was very casual when it wasn't so wealthy. And some of the really wealthy people there really care about that. They might have a much nicer home than someone would have in the late 60s, but they still really care about Sagaponack being this very quiet place. They have very high-test lives in New York, generally speaking, and they just want to get away from it all for the weekend. Sagaponack has terrible Wi-Fi, up until just recently. I think they're installing it as we speak, but had terrible Wi-Fi, and I think everyone was fine with that. At the end of the day, it was like, nope, sorry, can't get that call. Oops, that it just went out.
Can't do a business.
Can't do
a
business.
Zoom. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely that effort that we're trying to preserve that aspect of old Sagaponack.
I love that because I think that if anything over the past, let's say 5 years, especially post-COVID, but I think that people changed their perspective, right? And reflected on like what you're saying, like no matter how the people within the Sagaponack, yes, it is a very, again, expensive zip code, specifically that area of the Hamptons, very high net people live there or at least come out for the season.
Yeah.
And there is something great about being able to pause and then breathe.
Yeah, exactly.
And then have a space like Madoo where you could just walk in and you could just roam around and really just be out of, let's say, the larger modern structure that you're, or in the ocean or whatever. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that either.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Right, but it's really reflective of the old spirit.
Old spirit, yeah, it's definitely about that.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I felt it when I came there. And, part of the reason that I started this podcast is because I wanted these particular perspectives to be shared,
Exactly. And, and someone said to me, at some event, boy, Alejandro, you've done a great job creating a community here. And it's a really lovely little community. And it makes my job really hard because, you need more people to raise more money to, all of that.
Always.
But, we've got this great core group of people in Sagaponack and in Wainscott and in Bridgehampton that, feel like Madoo is almost part of their life. It feels like Madoo is part of their life.
Yeah.
And they really enjoy coming here. And they, sometimes people have told me that they sneak in and just to read a book, which is really
nice?
sweet.
Yeah.
Because that they're coming from a house which I'm sure has plenty of corners.
Right.
But they probably have the Mobile go
Yes.
guys
Yes.
making a ruckus, or the maids around, and
Right.
this, that, or the other, and they're just kind of like, let me just spin over to Madoo, break in. And I know I'm not crazy about that idea.
Right.
So I'm not.
Right.
I'm
He's
not
not
encouraging
promoting
that.
it. Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
encouraging that, but it is kind of fun to think that people take Madoo into their heart that way.
I love that.
Yeah.
What aspects of Madoo resonate personally with you most?
Probably that whole spirit of creativity, that the growth and the creativity. Like, it's just like right now, the garden. I'm just fascinated with the garden. I'm gonna, after this, go to Fowler's and get some seeding soil, and start my tomatoes. But there's flowers opening every day, and you just keep walking around the garden and looking. Like, I can't wait. You're like I'm a 60-year-old kid when I was like growing little tomatoes and looking for crocuses in the garden.
I love that.
And you have that aspect of growth, and then sometimes you're just like, wow, this is pretty. People always say, like, I see all the problems, and I do.
Of course.
But
Right.
at the same time, you do try and stop and smell the roses, and when you do, you're like, wow, this is special. You're kind of like, okay, this looks like England. I pulled it off. It's kind of amazing
Right.
sometimes.
You're able to do both, right? You're able to
Yeah.
see, okay, because that's your job. I mean, to
Exactly.
sort of troubleshoot, and then you're also to appreciate nature in its glory.
Yeah, and just sharing it with people, and just trying to figure out how you
really
can share
special.
it more, and keep it special and secret too.
Right.
It's very hard, but it's a fun
Well, you're doing it.
It's a fun project.
You're doing it.
Yeah.
And I know, sharing this, let's say, with online
Yeah.
might bring more people. However, it really is a beautiful place. I don't think it'll ever lose that.
I don't
that
think
character.
so. I mean, we don't have any parking, so that's your first.
Well, that's
yeah.
your first hurdle.
It's never going to be the Babylonian hordes coming through Madoo,
Right.
which is
Right.
nice.
I love that. How do you keep? Now that I'm thinking about it, because I did try. We grew up with a beautiful garden, vegetable garden with my grandmother. She would tend to it all the time, but it was up island. But how do you keep the deer, the animals, away, or just from preventing them from eating everything?
We sort of live with them to one degree or another. There was a deer in the garden last Saturday, and the gardeners chased it all around the garden for like an hour. They said, they're like, I don't think that deer's ever coming back here. And I hope not.
Yeah.
But they'll come through, and
Or the bunnies.
the bunnies are, you can't do anything about the bunnies. They're too cute.
They're
too
really
cute.
cute, but they do eat.
But they do eat.
everything.
They're hungry. One of the gardeners said, the poor beast must have been hungry too. Which is a nice way to look at things.
Right.
Like,
it
that
is.
kind of takes you back, and you're just kind of
Yes.
like, okay, I know I've been waiting a year to see this bloom, and
And they ate it
and
one
they
night.
ate it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they must have been hungry. So you sort of
I
live with it, and then
know, I know.
we spray for we spray deer off or whatever, to keep the deer away. And the garden is somewhat fenced, either by our neighbors or by us, and so it's not too bad. It could be really bad. It could be awful.
Yeah.
But and it's a lot of money that we spend making sure that it's not
Yes,
awful,
as
which
much
is kind
as-
of a drag.
Yeah, you have
You
to.
know.
I remember when we lived in Bridgehampton, we found baby bunnies, and my kids were little. It was like the best lesson in nature,
Yeah.
And the mother was not coming back. We were watching it. She was not coming back, and we had just left my kids with just leaving them things that they could eat, the baby bunnies and such. And the garden's like, what do you want us to do? We could place them in the bigger garden that they have,
Yeah.
where they had all their trees and all that. I said, no, just leave them. I really, they're the cutest. My kids are enjoying watching them and watching them grow. Yeah. And then I don't know, 3 weeks later, a month later, I look out in the morning and it's eating those plants, the beautiful plants that finally bloomed.
Yeah.
And my husband was, you wanted to take care of the bunnies and you didn't want, you wanted to keep them here, and this is what's happening.
Exactly.
So I totally see that.
It's like an
this is what's-
episode of
yes,
Bugs Bunny when the carrots disappear
Yes.
in the ground.
Within seconds. You're like,
Yeah.
this took forever to grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you just kind of like you try and be mellow about it.
Yeah, you do. I was just curious because every area is so beautifully curated and
Yeah.
and
No, there's
organic
a lot goes into
trying to keep them at bay.
keeping
Yeah.
them at bay.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Do you have a favorite spot in the garden or on the property?
It probably changes by season, by like what's going on in the garden. Because right now there's not a lot going on, but there's a berm that's covered in snowdrops. It's really, really pretty right now. But then in the summer, like the dahlias, there's like a big block of dahlias in like 18 million colors, and you're just kind of like, wow, like that looks, that looks good, like that's fun. I don't necessarily have like a favorite spot per se.
Yeah.
It changes.
Right.
It
Right.
is-
What do you envision the future for Madoo?
That's a good question. You kind of want to, or I kind of want to keep growing. Um, you know, obviously to be more and more financially secure, because you never know what might happen tomorrow. Um, and interacting more with the greater world in the gardening world mostly, but maybe also in the art world, where it's like, hey, they've done some really good shows. We've got a really exciting show this summer, in August, with Ugo Rondinone, who's an incredibly well-known artist, and he's going to be showing at Madoo, which is incredible. So sort of elevating that level of Madoo, that side of Madoo.
The artistic.
The artistic side and the garden side. So
Both, yeah.
whereas the garden side might be, hey, we might do a collab with Wave Hill, which is a really wonderful garden in the Bronx.
Oh.
That they're very similar in a lot of ways.
In the Bronx.
In the Bronx, yeah, in Riverdale.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a great garden. It's a very well known garden, and it'd be fun to like have intern programs that mix, and then maybe you add like a third partner, but that's in Europe, and maybe we're dealing with someone that we're friends with in France or Italy or Spain or something, and an intern goes from Wave Hill to Madoo to Europe.
That'd be really
and you kind
cool.
of, so it'd be kind of fun to sort of move into a bigger role, but we're just 2 acres at the end of the day, so it's
Well, it's a special 2 acres.
it's a special 2 acres. It's a very special 2
in a
acres.
really, beautiful location, and in a location that's really international, right? We know it
Exactly.
from the people who come out here year round, whether they're visiting or whether they're
Oh, it's incredible how that our audience has changed a lot, I would say, in the past, in that sort of post-COVID time
Yeah.
period, and it's much more international than it used to be.
overall you see that.
Overall,
you see the
yeah.
visitors.
Definitely, and a change in
Yeah.
in visitors. Yeah,
It shifted a lot.
yeah, but definitely a lot more international people coming through.
Yeah. And I also think that people were forced to see the connection with nature, right? It was like they
Yeah.
were home,
Well, I mean, COVID was. I mean, I know it was awful for a lot of
but
people.
but it
terrible
has
for a lot
so
of
many
people.
silver linings
But the
to
silver,
it. Yeah.
it was a big silver lining for us, and we had going into it. We had like
Nobody
everybody
knew.
else.
Yeah.
You had no idea what tomorrow was going to bring.
Right.
But it was great because people were walking all of a sudden, and we're like, "What's Madoo?" And in a time when you couldn't really get together with people,
You were able
you
to
could
go.
be
Yeah.
could go
Be
to
outside
Madoo and
safely.
be
Yeah, yeah.
outside in a safe environment.
Right.
Yeah, so it was very good for us, which is
Yeah.
awkward to say.
Yeah.
but-
No, I mean I think that was the greater plan, to be honest. It was
it
just
could be, yeah, exactly.
Because when else could people take a pause from their busy lives
Yeah,
and take the walk, right? And really
exactly.
walk,
and
not
really
just,
walk
yeah.
and just
and explore a place like Madoo, that's sort of
Yeah.
this hidden treasure.
the amount of times I've heard, "Oh, I've driven past that sign for 20 years," you can't imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Even myself thinking, what is
Yeah.
this place, and how come I haven't heard about it? It's,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, it's 2 miles away from where you live. Okay. Any upcoming programs or initiatives? I know you said it, but anything you want to highlight?
We're opening a welcome center in the
Yes.
in the spring, probably like mid-May.
Okay.
And that's really exciting because it's going to make the garden a lot more accessible. Right now, it's the entrance alone is 3 steps, which makes it very difficult for lots of people, including my 93-year-old mom. So this new area is going to be completely flushed to the ground, from the street into the build into this
Right.
little welcome center, which isn't terribly big, it's quite small in fact. But it also has like ADA bathrooms and that kind of thing. So that's really exciting for us. And then we're really excited for Much Ado About Madoo, our summer benefit, which is really cool.
If Robert Dash was here right now, what do you think he'd say about the spirit of Madoo and the garden's evolution and the impact of his work in the community?
I think he'd say you're spending too much money. He was very tight. For not being a Protestant, he was very tight. No, I think he'd be happy with it. I think he'd be impressed. I think he'd be really impressed with what we've been able to pull off. I mean, I have a very supportive board that work very hard at elevating Madoo, and that's always been the goal. The goal has always been to make Bob proud of it. That if he were to walk in, he'd be like, okay, this is nice, which would be great. Every once in a while a glass breaks or something, and you're like, ooh, Bob's not happy with that.
He's sending you a message.
Sending messages. Yeah, every once in a while we get a message.
I'm sure.
Loud and clear.
I'm sure.
But generally speaking, I think he'd be happy with it, and yeah, literally, he would probably say there was no need to spend that money.
Right.
But that's just
But
him.
right.
And it was also like, it's just different. There's a lot more going on in today's world. I've got to keep Instagram going. I've got to meet people here, there, and everywhere, and there's always something. I'm sort of surprised at how multifaceted my position is. So it doesn't allow me as much gardening as he might have done. So we use the gardening crew, which has been with us for 25 years. That's the other thing that's cool about Madoo is that it's very much like a home garden.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we have a gardening crew, and it probably averages something like 2 men for a day a week, roughly. And people are always amazed by that. And and the thing is that if it rains that Saturday when they're coming,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I'm not getting that day back. I'm not getting that day back.
Right.
They're not. They're busy, and they've got me scheduled for 1 day a week, and that's it.
Do you have schools involved at all?
Yeah. We do. In particular, the Sagaponack school come a couple of times a year. Mm-hmm. We'd love to increase that. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that's definitely on mind. So we have someone new joining the team at Madoo, and she'll be working on that and getting in touch with schools and trying to figure out what kind of programming would be appropriate for
Right.
what ages.
And the seasonality of it.
The seasonality
that's a
of
little
it.
bit of a challenge,
Exactly,
right?
because it's not like, oh, let's just take the kids to a pretty garden,
Right.
which is what it was, which is what field trips were like when I was a kid.
Right.
Now it's more like, okay, in 6th grade we're studying X, Y, and Z. We're
Right.
studying Roman
Right.
history. Like, okay, come to Madoo and we'll go see the Pompeian court.
Right. Right.
Things that can be more tied into their science classes or mathematics
Exactly.
or whatever. So it would be creating programs for school kids that would really tie into what they're learning at
It'd be
school
fabulous.
and have them learn in a different way, because
Right.
everyone learns in a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, hands-on learning is always, and real-life learning is always the best way, right?
Exactly.
As we know, just from doing our work.
Yeah.
But certainly, and I know schools are trying to create their own gardens Southampton, Bridgehampton, East
absolutely.
Hampton. So it's sort of like, if there's a way to make that connection, it would be so valuable for both Madoo and
for the kids,
schools and the public schools and the local kids.
Yeah.
What do you hope people take away when they visit Madoo? What are your hopes?
I think going back to that concept of, Madoo as a preservation aspect, and that you can slow your life down, and it doesn't need to be, it's extraordinarily extravagant, Madoo, but it's just not extravagant in that 21st century Hamptons sort of way.
Right.
We don't even like to say the word Hamptons, to be honest. It's much more, when I was a kid, it used to be going out to the country, which is crazy to think, or going out to the beach.
Yeah.
Now, I tend to just say East End usually.
Yes.
But obviously there's the marketing aspect of it. You can't not say it. But I think that someone could come away with thinking, hey, I could do this because it really is just done by people, and it is just it's really a garden about time and patience and all of those things. Just kind of like, hey, you can start something small. It doesn't need to be extravagant, and you can grow it. And like I said, it's 2 acres, which is relatively small in the garden world. So it's doable. That like in a quiet sort of way.
It is doable, and
It's doable. I mean,
Bob started it,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
He
you need
started
60
it.
years to get what we have.
Right.
But, I think there's a Chinese proverb of, 20 years ago is the best time to have planted a tree.
Mm-hmm. The
Something
next
like-
time, right? The next
Something
time
along-
is
and,
today.
And the next best time is today.
Yes.
So
yes.
the encouragement I have for everyone is hopefully that they go out and plant a tree.
Absolutely. What do you think Madoo teaches about the relationship with humans and nature and the legacy we leave behind?
That's legacy is kind of like one of those really important things. Bob didn't have kids, and kids are generally your biggest legacy. Unless you're Andrew Carnegie and you build 150 libraries in the city. But that you could, stop and think about, like, Bob left this incredible legacy, that he created something really quite beautiful for people to enjoy, and he opened it up during his lifetime. Right now, it's very difficult to do like garden tours for a lot of different reasons, admittedly, but one of them being people don't want like people in their garden. And you're kind of like, that's kind of a little selfish. I mean, there's a lot of insurance issues, and there's a lot of permitting issues. There's a lot of other issues, but part of it is definitely like not wanting, like, why would I want strangers in my garden? So that whole aspect of, munificence, general accepting of the public, people that aren't like you, all of that.
Which stems from fear.
And it stems from fear,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That is kind of a shame. But it'd be nice if people realize, like, hey, we can do this, and maybe we should open up our garden for the parish or for Madoo or for whomever. Interesting.
It is. It is.
Something to think about.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for sharing your insight, for sharing your expertise, for sharing the journey that you've been on, and obviously for all the work that you do for Madoo, because it is a really special little treasure on
Thank
the
you.
East End. And it's something that I hope that everyone gets a chance to go at least once.
Yeah,
Try
that'd be
not to
great.
break in.
Try
doing
not to break
often. And thank you for sharing it all with us. And I wish you lots of luck. And I will see you for sure at your fundraiser in June.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.
Such a pleasure.
Alejandro, thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia.
Take care.